5:56 p.m. I gotta put on a smile. 5:56 p.m. Friday, July 25th, 2025. Mark Kulak, Houstonic.live. And another episode of our 283 series today. This is a research and archival and analysis channel. And as you've been following me for a long time, or if you are, you would know. And if you're just watching for the first time, you might be interested in knowing that it was the opioid epidemic that is ongoing still within the United States of America that initially sparked my curiosity into what the heck was going on in our country. And that was well over 10 years ago when that started my curiosity anyways, before it got as bad as it is and has been over the last several years. You can find my archive at Houstonic.live. It's named after a river in the northeastern part of the United States of America, where I grew up near and have many generations of family from. And what we are listening to right now is sadly the recently deceased Chuck Mangione. This was a song, Feels So Good. I have to admit, I am not familiar with his catalog of music, but I do remember hearing that song so many times growing up. As a matter of fact, it still goes through my head every once in a while. This 283 series, here's a book I have open on the screen right now, a PDF for an 1880 book, year 1880. That is 145 years before the current date, almost a century and a half. And this book was written by a Dr. H.H. Kane, K-A-N-E last name. I believe that the first H initial is for Henry. So it would be Dr. Henry H. Kane. And he was doing his practice, and he lived in New York City. And he published this book in the year 1880 titled The Hypodermic Injection of Morphine. Its history, advantages, and dangers, based upon the experience of 360 physicians. Having dug in, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I'm pretty confident that this Dr. Henry H. Kane, or H.H. Kane, at this time in the year 1880, was actually much younger than you would think, given the fact that this is a nearly 360-page book which was published. Now, I don't know what the entrance for writing a book at that time was, but a 360-page book, medical book, granted, it's larger print. That's a big deal back then. And I think he was only 26 years old. I believe he was born in 1854, which means he was only 26 years old when he wrote this book. And he had already felt compelled to study hypodermic injections and the use of hypodermic injections to administer morphine. This subject of intramuscular injection, using a hypodermic syringe to inject medicine into the body. It could be done intravenously, it could be done just under the skin, or it could be done into the muscle, is something that captured my interest lately. It actually captured Jonathan Cooey's PhD, Gigaome Biological, interest before mine, at least 2 years, probably. And he was screaming it into the wilderness, and very few people picked up on exactly how important the nuances were of what he was trying to say. Might have sounded to the untrained, and as it sounded to me, as simply saying vaccines are dumb. But he said it very clearly. Intramuscular injection into a healthy human with any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb. It's a dumb idea. He said it. He didn't say morphine, although morphine is very addictive. But he said a combination of substances, complex biological materials, fluids from other animals, bacterium, dead bacterium, whatever. Something more than just a simple substance. Intramuscularly, IM, not on the skin, not subcutaneously, not like a smallpox, but intramuscularly, with the intent of augmenting the immune system. He has said that before. And that implies that the immune system could be augmented. Can the immune system really be augmented? Can it really? That's a huge ass assumption. It's one thing for one person's own physiology to adjust, to sort of be in sync with the people within your who you cohabitate with the person you're married with, perhaps with children that you adopt. But it's another thing altogether to think that the body could be made immune to a disease. I mean, can it really? That's a big assumption. I'm not sure it can. I'm sure that the method of smallpox vaccination, which is actually more akin to a variant of what I just said a few moments ago, that's possible. But this whole injecting something inside, so if you just happen to have a fistful of anthrax powder thrown up, shoved up your nose, you'll be cool. So the topic of intramuscular injection, which can only be done, of course, with a hypodermic syringe, has piqued our interests. And the use of hypodermic syringes to inject medicine really boomed in the 1870s and the 1880s in the United States. It blossomed. And by far and away, the predominant reason hypodermic syringes, hypodermic injections were being used to administer medicine was morphine, by far and away. It was really the only known pain medicine at the time that worked. And it was addictive. And it was becoming a cure-all for everything. And you could get it without a prescription. People started to get their own hypodermic needles if they could afford them to administer their own injections. And this, in tandem with hypodermic syringes being used, for example, in agriculture, ushered in the hypodermic syringe as a standard tool. In fact, it became almost synonymous with the medical practice. So there are some fantastic books out there, which you can buy old copies of them or originals on eBay. And in the defense of those at the Wellcome Trust, they have a lot of great PDFs available for download. PDFs, perfect scans of these original books. Many have said that in order to lie to accomplish certain things, in order to lie to push new agendas, that people who lie need to put the truth out there somewhere, or they need to tell a version of the truth in order to make it possible for them to do that. I understand that statement, okay? Now, I'm sure that there's some truth to that. One way of looking at this is that these books are put out there. They don't say, hey, you should really read this and understand the history of intramuscular injection. But they're there. So, in a way, they have alleviated themselves of responsibility, you could think of it this way, by putting these books out there. Because no one else has taken the initiative to find them and to read them. That is one way of looking at it. Or maybe they're just out there and they don't really understand. Because I think a lot of people have never really put this together. I'll bet you some of the most enthusiastic immunization supporters, vaccine supporters in the world don't really understand this history. Now, we know that there was a drug epidemic in the United States in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Let me open up an article. This is the Smithsonian Institute. Now, the paragraph here that's highlighted is, this is a recent article. It's like 2018, recent-ish, okay? By 1895, morphine and opium powders, like OxyContin and other prescription opioids today, had led to an addiction epidemic that had affected roughly 1 in 200 Americans. So 1 in 200 Americans were becoming addicted to morphine and opium powders back then. Before the year 1900, the typical opiate addict in America was an upper-class or middle-class white woman. Today, doctors are relearning lessons from their predecessors learned more than a lifetime ago. Well, I'm not sure about that last part, but it's a January 4th, 2018 article. It's titled, Inside the Story of America's 19th Century Opiate Addiction. Doctors then, as now, overprescribed the painkiller to patients in need, and then, as now, government policy had a distinct bias. Good article. Another good one to read is, this one is from National Affairs. National Affairs, this is from summer 2025, How to Think About the Drug Crisis. and this was written by Charles Fane Lehman. And I want to show a chart in here. This is from this 2025 article. It says the source of this chart is the United States Congress Joint Economic Committee Social Capital Project Analysis of CDC data. On the bottom, on the x-axis, you see the years starting from the year 1900, 1900, and then each decade is another bullet point, and then it goes all the way to the year 2020. Now, I don't know if this includes 2021 or 22. Hard to say. I think this peak here is actually 2021 or 2022. I did some mathematical analysis on it. So assume that the peak of this chart is around the year 2021, okay? This highlights that the drug overdose death rate, the fatality rate per 100,000 Americans in the year 2021 and 2022 was 7 times that of the year 1900. So somehow, what was previously the worst opium, or I should say, drug overdose epidemic in U.S. history, it was not in the 1980s, as we thought with Reagan. It was actually in the year 1900. The year 1900 had a drug overdose death rate that was 2 or 3 times higher than it was in the 1980s under Reagan when they had the whole war on drugs. However, somehow or another, by the year 2021 and 22, the drug overdose death rate in the United States wound up being 7 times higher than that other peak, or 14 to 20 times higher. Can you actually conceive that? I'm not saying that it was twice, 3 times, which is horrific. 10 to 20 times as high of a fatal drug overdose rate in the year 2022 as the year 1980. How is that even possible? How is that even possible? And somehow Brett Weinstein doesn't understand that would have a demographic impact and a dramatic impact on life expectancy, because life expectancy is calculated each year. You add up the ages of all the people that died, and you divide by the number of people that died. It's very simple. It's the average age of someone that died in a particular year. It's a very simple calculation. People misunderstand what it means. Let's just say there was a horrible volcano that killed everyone in California. Terrible tragedy. That would mean 50 million more deaths, massive number of increased deaths, massive number of young people, middle-aged people dying. That would result in that 1 year life expectancy going down dramatically. Because life expectancy, what it also means, okay, is the average age that somebody died in a year. Life expectancy suggests that it's how long people born in a year are expected to live. Well, how do we know how long someone in a year is expected to live? We don't know what's going to happen 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now. We don't know if there's going to be any horrible tragedies. So in absence of all of that data, the best you can do, and it's not a ridiculous thing to do, by the way, is to figure out the average age of someone that died in that year and assume that that will be the average going forward. It's very simple. That's why you can have big blips, or I should say decreases in a particular year, if there is, for example, a lot of troops dying of influenza, for example, or a famine, something like that, or a war. So somehow this opioid epidemic of today is, at the minimum, 7 to 8 times worse than the previous era, which was a peak of the year 1900. But that said, let's not lose track of that. Let's still have some appreciation for the fact that the first real opioid epidemic was here. And it was bad enough that the government took action and spoke about it. Isn't that interesting? The current drug epidemic is 7, 8, 10 times worse than a drug epidemic that led to the Pure Food and Drug Act and the basis of the FDA. Yet somehow all of these podcasters, the Rule by podcasters, the Weinsteins, and everyone else, feel as though they should be omitting Danny Jones, Joe Rogan, all of them. Every once in a while, you'll see someone such as Tucker Carlson. And I know immediately some people get mad. How can you call out Tucker as a good guy? Look, Tucker's part of the machine. We all know that. But every once in a while, he throws something out there that unfortunately I think a lot of people miss and don't have some appreciation for. He doesn't have to say that like people are dying young at all. He doesn't have to say that at all. Sadly, he says it and no one appreciates it. They just go straight for all of the other stuff. But I will take whatever I can get, okay? I know it's not enough, but I'll take whatever I can get. And Tucker Carlson, love him or hate him, actually throws out more little truth nuggets like that than Brett Weinstein has ever, or Robert Malone, or etc., the rest of the crowd. So, to highlight here, drug overdose rate and morphine use was exceptionally high, and the on-road for it was the needle. It was the hypodermic injections. I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs on here by Dr. H.H. Kane, or Henry H. Kane, from this 1880 book. And this 1880 book, to be clear, precedes by 5 years the first use of intramuscular injections to administer a vaccine to a human. Intramuscular injections are using a hypodermic syringe to inject vaccines into animals has already started around this time. But the idea of using this for people, they're thinking about it. But the first time that is done is around 1885. And it doesn't really get a widespread traction until the 1890s. And even then, it's still a small percentage, but it's starting to increase, okay? But keep that in mind. So this is the preface. This is the beginning of the book. A physician of the present day, again, 1880, Dr. Henry H. Kane, an interesting man whose obituary I will refer to. A physician of the present day, without a hypodermic syringe in his pocket or close at hand, would be looked upon as would have been a physician 50 years ago, that would have been 1830, did he not own or use a lancet. There is no proceeding in medicine that has become so rapidly popular, no method of allaying pain so prompt in its action and permanent in its effect, no plan of medication that has been so carelessly used and thoroughly abused, and no therapeutic discovery that has been so great a blessing and so great a curse to mankind as the hypodermic injection of morphia. I think that paragraph should be read twice, so let's read it again. Dr. Henry H. Kane. There is no proceeding in medicine that has become so rapidly popular, no method of allaying pain so prompt in its action and permanent in its effect, no plan of medication that has been so carelessly used and thoroughly abused, and no therapeutic discovery that has been so great a blessing and so great a curse to mankind as the hypodermic injection of morphia. So with that said, if this is true, and I believe it is 100,000 billion absolutely 0% true, why is this something that's not discussed? Because this, the hypodermic injection, went from a curiosity to the standard tool because of morphine. And that's it. Much has written upon the advantages of administering the drug in this way, advantages that have been proved beyond question, and almost nothing upon the dangers, immediate and remote, thereon attendant. My attention was first called to the latter by the able and interesting article of Dr. E. Fletcher Ingalls, I-N-G-A-L-S, in the Chicago Medical Journal and Examiner for May 1878. This article and the knowledge soon afterward obtained that many honest, practical, and well-educated physicians in various parts of the country had entirely abandoned the use of the instrument led me to a careful study of the subject, the results of which are here given. By personal inquiry letters and chiefly by means of 6 questions published through the great kindness of the editors in every prominent medical journal of Great Britain, France, Germany, and America, I have been enabled to gather much valuable and interesting material hitherto unpublished. There's a couple of other notes in here, and these are the questions that he asked, and I think I can read the introduction here. Chapter 1, History of the Discovery, the Instrument and Advantages of the Method, the Doctrine of Localization. Think 1880, 1870. How do you do something locally? The credit of being the discoverer of the subcutaneous method of administering drugs has always been awarded to Dr. Alexander Wood of Edinburgh, Scotland, who commenced the practice in 1843 and wrote upon it in the year 1855. There's a lot of pictures in here of the original syringes and so on. It's a 300-page book. I have gone through it enough, and you can download it. The link is out there. It's available for public download. And the version that is available for public download is optical character recognized, so you don't need to run OCR on it. You can search for it, the text. One complaint I have of the books that are on the Wellcome Collection is that the books in the Wellcome Collection, when you download them, I mean, the fact that they're there is an amazing blessing, and thank you to the people behind the Wellcome Collection. Most of them do not have OCR in it, so you have to run your own, and that can misscan, etc., etc. But anyways, so it made me dig into more about Dr. Kane, and he wrote several books on this particular subject. He actually wound up working in some centers in New York where they would be treating people who were dealing with morphine addiction, and he started to sell some solutions to deal with opium addiction, I should say morphine addictions, which in turn led him to actually make quite a bit of money in the year 1890. And then he wound up using his fortune to buy racehorses. That's serious. It's an interesting story. And then from there, he wound up making a bunch of money. Then he lost a bunch of money. Eventually, he wound up getting arrested, I think, in the year 1905 for trying to swindle someone with a radium treatment. And then he went to a sanitarium, and then he died of tuberculosis in 1906. So it's kind of a sad story. The obituary is out there at multiple newspapers, which I have captured, I've backed up, but I don't have available on my archive yet. Kane also did research, Dr. Henry H. Kane. This is an 1882 newspaper, Astoria, Oregon. Opium smoking. Dr. Henry H. Kane, and this is 2 years after this book. Dr. Henry H. Kane is the author of a small volume tracing the spread of the habit of opium smoking in this country, United States. The facts which he presents are striking testimony of the Mongolization that is in progress. He assigns the genesis of this body and soul-destroying vice to San Francisco sometime in the year 1868. Since then, it has spread by the routes of travel eastward to Chicago and thence up and down the continent from New Orleans to Boston. There is scarcely a town of any size that now in the country which is not its opium den. The attendants are in all cases Chinese, for they alone know how to, quote, cook, unquote, as it is called, the drug. There are other forms of this habit, such as the injection of morphia under the skin and the drinking of laudanum, which are not traceable to the Chinese. But opium smoking is a peculiarity that belongs almost exclusively to that race. The opium is worked up into bolus, placed in a pipe, and smoked. No more than 2 or 3 puffs are gained from a single bolus. So the highlight here is that although the idea of using opium for pleasure, for relaxation, for socializing, for pain treatment, whatever, was mostly through smoking it. And that came from the Chinese. The idea of injecting it did not come from the Chinese. That wasn't their idea. That was, you can't blame the opioid epidemic entirely on Asia, because the idea of injecting it came from amongst the people who developed the hypodermic needle. That didn't come out of China. That came out of Europe somewhere. Germany, England, France, I don't know. And then as they realized they could use that to localize medicine for pain treatment, for surgeries, etc. And then what had happened at some point was it was discovered that you could get more of the morphine. You could get more of the effects of the morphine by injecting it than eating it. You could eat it. You could smoke it. Smoking, it's not bad. However, you get most of it. You get more of the active ingredient by injecting it than any other route. So this efficiency and everything that it could be used for, and then of course the fact that it's more powerful and more addictive, that's American. That's England or French or whatever. And the whole morphine, morphomania, it was called a whole bunch of different things. That's America. That's the United States. As bad as that was, as far as creating many people who were addicted, hurting productivity, probably hurting families, leading to a lot of deaths, as I just showed just a moment ago, deaths from that, when you want to look at that chart, is nothing compared to today. However, though, it was enough to usher in the hypodermic needle and make it mainstream. And that eventually led to people thinking, hey, let's look at it this way, okay? If injecting morphine gives you more of the morphine and lets you use the morphine in a way that's more efficient, more complete, well, if vaccines can be injected, why wouldn't vaccines be the same? You can inject the vaccine and you can enjoy more of the vaccine. You'll probably become even more immune than you would by eating the vaccine or rubbing the vaccine into your skin. So the idea, that's how the idea leaped from morphine administration with the hypodermic needle to using a hypodermic syringe, hypodermic injection, intramuscular, to administer vaccines. It started as a dumb idea, as Jonathan Cooey has said. It was a dumb idea. They rationalized it. It was not done nefariously, but it was done based on a very bad understanding of the immune system. It was based, though, on an actual observation, which is true. You inject morphine, you're going to enjoy more of the morphine. We know that morphine does something, but what is a vaccine? Can you actually make people immune against pathogens? Is that possible? That assumes it's possible. Assuming it is possible, well, then maybe injecting it is better. But now the injection of a vaccine is based upon the assumption that you can vaccinate against pathogens. Not even sure that's even possible. In that case, what the hell is a vaccine? And also, the things being injected with vaccines are very different. Also, with morphine, when it's injected, the more that's injected, the better the high. Well, maybe the same is true with a vaccine. You inject more, you become more immune. So, this thinking process is so important. I have this book downloaded. I have this book archived. I have several other books regarding intramuscular injection, which are still publicly available. I will be adding them to my index. I've already downloaded them, and I'll share what they are later on. These articles, which have been written about the older opioid epidemic, these things are still available as well. And also, with the injection of morphine, yes, being a simpler substance, a much simpler substance, the odds of there being paralysis associated with it were probably pretty low, unless a needle was contaminated or something like that. So when when infantile paralysis and child paralysis started to tick up in 1890 and 1895, and then in the year 1900, ticking up as more and more children were being injected intramuscularly using a hypodermic syringe. They were being injected with vaccines. They probably didn't think that the act of the intramuscular injection itself could have been causing the increases of paralysis, which eventually were blamed on a virus called polio, because people were injecting other things and there was no paralysis. So therefore, you have that disconnect. But that disconnect was perhaps facilitated by the fact that injecting a vaccine or some complex fluid baked in broth and who knows what else called a vaccine, that's a very different deal than injecting pure morphine. So I think that's it. It was just a quick show. I might be able to cut this down a little bit. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Rest in peace, Chuck Mangione. And I will do another show tomorrow. Maybe do another video short tonight. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you. Take care. God bless. And I will see you again soon.